Well, that brings us very nicely into the less wrong posts for this week, because the first one is Allais Malaise.
I liked this. Basically, I pulled up 3 quotes I can run through real quick, and the long and short of my thoughts on this whole post is that basically I think this is what I was saying when we first talked about these last episode, but just put in clear Yudkowsky speak.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was pretty much exactly what we said, where if what you really care about is the outcome, then that 1% is what you should focus on. And if what you really care about is money, then the money is what you should focus on. And that's why I don't have too much to say about this. Yeah. It seems like we already came to the same conclusions the previous week by sitting down and actually thinking through things for 10 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. That's the good takeaway. I do like, again, the classic Yudkowsky language. If satisfying your intuitions is more important to you than money, do whatever the heck you want. Drop the money over Niagara Falls, blow it all on champagne, set your hair on fire, whatever. If the largest utility you care about is the utility of feeling good about your decision, then any decision that makes you feel good is the right one.
Yeah, a genuine Wesleyan statement right there.
Right? It's spot on. I did enjoy the Bays Blast with Wes. You had said, oh, well, let me explain this to you if you don't have an opinion on it. And he says, whatever it is, I have an opinion on it. That's another classic Wesism, and I liked it.
Yep.
It made me laugh at the gym.
So let us move on to Against Discount Rates, which has some new information in it.
Yudkowsky doesn't like coupons?
No. Yudkowsky doesn't like the idea of reducing the utility of any calculation based on how far out into the future it goes.
Oh, I know. I was just running with the wrong reading of the headline.
I was explaining it to people who have not read the post and do not know what we're talking about.
Oh, yes. You need to read these, or at least listen to us talk about them semi-coherently.
It's got to be weird for people who just listen to these without having read the posts, because we assume people have read them, generally, right?
I don't know. If people read them, what are we doing? I guess we talk about them to throw our thoughts on them.
I mean, if people haven't read them, though, then some of the things we say have got to be kind of confusing, right?
I suppose so. I'd be curious to hear from anybody who hasn't read a single post but listens to these episodes.
Me too. Let us know. I figure most of those people probably just fast forward past the less wrong posts part.
Maybe.
Yudkowsky says the idea that it is literally fundamentally 5% more important that a poverty-stricken family have clean water in 2008 than a similar family have clean water in 2009 seems like pure discrimination to me. The only way this makes sense is if he assumes they both get clean water for only a certain period of time, and that period of time is equal. A family gets clean water in 2008 for 1 month versus a similar family getting clean water in 2009 for 1 month. Otherwise, if you're just giving a family access to clean water, then having an extra year of clean water is obviously much better. In which case, you would agree with him, especially given all the caveats he gives up front that this is discounting things like monetary inflation, opportunity costs of other investments, probabilistic catastrophes. I guess once you hold everything else equal and the only thing you're changing is an arbitrary number on the year, then yes, that is literally correct, but it's very hard to do that.
Yeah, I think this is kind of one of those pure thought experiments where all else being equal, and literally all else, even if it doesn't make sense, because getting water starting tomorrow for the rest of my life is better than getting water starting in a year for the rest of my life. What he's trying to draw here is the idea that there's not a clear, he's not even talking morality necessarily, he's talking probability theory-wise, between somebody close to you and somebody far away from you in time.
Yeah.
That's a point that comes up a lot in moral philosophy of why do people far away from you matter less than people near you?
And I think he's 100% correct that just having a pure discount rate of any percent is ridiculous. But that's at least as far as I always assumed. I didn't think discount rates existed just for the fact of their existence. I thought that it was literally because of things like compounding interest rates and probability of disasters and other things that made the discounting rates actually something that we want to have, as opposed to pure prejudice based on distance.
I think the pure prejudice based on distance is a heavy component in a lot of our behavior as a society. It's not even the distant future. The idea of what we owe the future comes up. That only becomes a problem when your actions aren't taking into account what happens down the road.
Yeah.
He says that if your temporal discounting follows any curve other than the exponential, you'll have time inconsistent goals that force you to wage war against your future selves. And I like the language, and it sounds like a sci-fi movie. And it might actually be one. I never saw Looper, but I remember the premise. I like the summary of drug and alcohol use, or drinking is borrowing happiness from tomorrow.
Right.
And it's I'll feel even happier tonight because drinking is fun, but I'll feel worse tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
That is kind of an inconsistent place to be if you scale that up at all, right? Unless you want to just play it very consistently and say, I'm going to really enjoy the next 10 years, but I'm going to really hate the next, the 50 after that or something, right?
I don't know. I think that I wouldn't want to use the term wage war against your future selves, although I can see it getting to that point if you're going to live long enough. And quite honestly, that does sound like an awesome premise. But like, for me, this is actually a strong, good reason to be pro discount rates, because future me is, in fact, different from present me and may not value the same things I value. The older I've gotten, the more I've realized this. Things that 20-year-old me would have valued and would have wanted for 40-year-old me, they're not the same. There are some things that I'm like, whoo, boy, am I glad that 20-year-old me does not have infinite power over my life, because I very much disagree with some things that 20-year-old me thought. Part of that is because I think 20-year-old me was just simply wrong on a number of factual issues, but other parts of it are things that have just changed in my personal utility function, my desires and preferences. I now expect that things will continue to change for me in the future, which is a reason to not value the future me quite as much. He may be as different from me as, my next door neighbor is from me. Which is kind of a war against future me, but whatever.
I have 3 thoughts on these. I'll see if I can get them all out in order quickly.
Okay.
One is that I think it's future you in some cases, but it's also future society. And society as a whole might share your values, like enjoying clean drinking water, for example. So I think that's point 1 succinctly. Point 2 is an anecdote, which I can skip. And point 3 is that there are things that younger you and current you and future you probably unequivocally will agree on.
Definitely.
Kind of like with the society thing of clean drinking water, but basic health, Like this is a good example and a quick anecdote. My dad is 61, and he kind of just decided within the last year, he almost died from COVID last year, and that was kind of his Kickstarter to like, all right, what the hell? How do I start getting healthy? And he's been smoking for 45 years and hasn't had a cigarette in a month.
Damn,
And
congrats to him.
I know, it's awesome. We were talking about it this weekend, and I had said that the best time to do, to take charge of your health and start that kind of forward thinking is yesterday. The second best time is today.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the kind of thing where, like, if 20-year-old you is wondering, man, do I want to sit around, eat this entire bag of Doritos and drink a 2-liter Mountain Dew and play, World of Warcraft all night? Or do I want to, like, go for a run first?
Yeah.
Older you will appreciate having gone for, run, whatever. Disregard any wear and tear to your knees or something, right? But
right.
Just some general exercise. That's something that is consistent with future you. And that's unlikely to change.
Yeah. I'm kind of interested in that anecdote, if you can, like, squish it into 3 minutes or something.
Oh, I can squeeze it into 1 minute. My wife interviewed, toured the campus of Naropa, this hippie college outside of Boulder. She was very much of like, kind of like barefoot, basically anarcho-capitalist, down at the government kind of person in her late teens, I guess.
Oh, cool.
Well, she went to Naropa, and fortunately, she was like, oh, you guys don't even have a real library? Like, forget this. I'll go somewhere with like a library. Because she was an IB student and was using CSU's library before that. This place, apparently, you went to like CU to go use their library instead because they didn't really have books. And she's like, okay, it turns out I do want an actual education more than I want just the hippie mindset. But if she had been allowed to indulge that, or if she hadn't had that realization, her life trajectory would have wound up very differently. And she probably would have regretted it.
Okay.
She's like, man, I sure wish I had like gone to a real school so I could get a real job, right? Rather than just, write peace studies essays online or something.
Yeah.
But luckily it shook out that way. But it's the kind of thing where the other example might be like asking an 8-year-old what they want for dinner, and it's ice cream, right?
Right. Yeah. You need
that
certain level of self-awareness.
Right. That sounds great until, 2 weeks in and they feel like shit all the time. It's like, man, kid, it's the ice cream. You got to stop it. If only you were aware of future you.
Did you see the thing recently where apparently there's some scientific result that ice cream is pretty healthy for you and no one's able to understand it, so they've just kind of been suppressing it for 5 years? I don't know if this is real or what to make of it even.
This is where I need to draw the line with government can hide Paxlovid and the COVID vaccine from us and whatever, but they're going to lie to us about ice cream?
It seems so counterintuitive, and just on its face, it must be wrong. So they're like, this must be a wrong result. We're not going to publish it. But also, now I want to know more about this. Why didn't you publish it? If
anyone has any links or anything about this, I'd be curious. It could be that houses that buy ice cream also have other benefits. And, like, again, how do you control for that?
Yeah.
So it could be one of those correlation issues.
And it ties in with today's episode very well.
Yeah, right. God, I forgot, because we recorded the main post like a week ago, or the main section. Yeah, I mean, again, publish everything and let other scientists hash it out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like that approach.
All right, shall we continue?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Eliezer says, but a 5% year discount rate compounded exponentially implies that it's worth saving a single person from torture today at the cost of 168 people being tortured a century later. In reality, might that be correct? It's possible that saving that one person from torture today can have enough positive effects by them getting to actually do things with their life without all the trauma and stuff that it is the equivalent of saving 168 people from being tortured however many centuries from now in expected utility outcomes. But then again, that brings us back to he gave all those caveats up top along the lines of this doesn't have impacts in the future based on investments, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know where to put this. Like, obviously, if you're just comparing one person being tortured versus 168 people being tortured somewhere else, the one person being tortured is the
preferable outcome.
There we go.
We don't want to use the word better in the same sentence that use the word torture, but yeah,
exactly
preferable.
Yeah,
yes. I think this is probably just like as a thought about this post as a whole. He's pointing out like basic decision theory thinking and frameworks, and he's trying to use it in the context of like, okay, let's actually just weigh lives. But as we keep bumping up against, there's not really a clean way to do that. If you're going to just stick with the pure math, it doesn't seem like you can account for, well, what happens if I actually do this versus I actually don't and then see what the outcome is a century down the road or something, right? This kind of comes up with the next thing that I pulled, which was that people who deal in global catastrophic risks sometimes have to wrestle with the discount rate assumed by standard economics. Is a human civilization spreading through the Milky Way 100,000 years hence, the Milky Way about being 100,000 light years across, really to be valued at a discount of 10 to the negative 2,227 relative to our own little planet today? And I thought this was fun because, Will MacAskill's book came out 2022 or 2023, What We Owe the Future. 22, that makes sense. It was all last year, wasn't it? But, and I know that, neither Yudkowsky nor MacAskill invented the concept of caring about the future. But it's fun to see a reference to this. I can imagine this sentence exactly being in Will MacAskill's book.
One of the people Will MacAskill was majorly influenced by was Eliezer Yudkowsky and his sequences. So
I know, right? Isn't that fun?
Yeah.
It's just fun to kind of see, because now we're going through these artifacts of history, and it's kind of fun to see the shakeouts that they've had down the road.
Yeah, you get to see it at the very beginning.
Yeah. It's like, you don't get to run just, I guess, like the pure math of it and get an outcome number because, like you said, one decision actually has impacts, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, so like in the example of not torturing one person now versus 168 in a century, and it's like, but not torturing the person now actually has effects.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the shakeout of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, if we zoom out and just like, all right, well, he's just looking at the numbers and
the reason he's just looking at the numbers, and again, I can't believe I keep forgetting this, and it hit me smack in the face halfway through this post, when he says an AI with a 5% temporal discount rate has a near infinite incentive to expend all available resources on attempting time travel. And I was like, oh, right. The reason this discount rate really, really matters for the sequences is because the underlying foundational assumption of the sequences is this is helping to prepare people who are going to be trying to create our AI gods in the near future. And if your god has a 5% temporal discount rate across all of humanity, across all of time, that's a very, very bad thing. You should greatly reconsider what you're doing to your god here. So, yeah. In the case of making an AI god, I definitely do not want them to have a temporal discount rate anywhere approaching 5%. Maybe no discount rate at all. I'm not entirely sure. But yes, please do not sacrifice the entire light cone of the future for a few dozen humans in the next few dozen years.
Yeah, I didn't want to spoil the way we brought this post home. But yeah, I think in general, whenever I'm reading the sequences, unless it's like the quantum mechanics ones, I think was more kind of like just answering a question that he wanted to indulge with. I don't really see how that relates to AI, but if anything else is like, what is he talking about? This doesn't seem like it's quite lining up with my intuitions or whatever. Ask yourself the question of like, okay, what's the point of this post if we're looking at it from the lens of, building a god?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, of course I don't want my god making these sorts of trade-offs, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want I want the all-powerful world-governing machine to care about the future in 101 years, just as much as they care about it in 100 years.
Yeah.
We can't put like a hard time horizon on it, because I think he even says something like, then it would be perfectly sensible and actually I probably borderline required by decision theory to like burn through all of our resources in the next century, because at century +1, it doesn't care.
Yeah. He also has this great pithy line, you wouldn't like a temporal discount if the past was still around. Yes, this is very true. That's one of the great things about the past. This thing at the end here, I don't know if we even want to talk about it. It is, I'm going to go ahead and say it first, and then you can tell me if it's worth keeping in, because it's kind of politics and wokeism related.
Sure.
Okay, this came home to kind of hit me in the butt, or the place you get hit when you have noticed a thing that you did to yourself that was stupid. A petard hoist, if one will. He says, discrimination always seems more justifiable somehow when you're not the person who is discriminated against, but you will be, in ominous Yoda tones, I'm assuming. This is literally true in my case, because when I was in my teens, I was active in progressive spaces, and I too greatly hated the old white men and said how much they suck and how much they fucked up everything and we got to get rid of them. Obviously, somehow, somewhere, it must have occurred to me that if enough years pass, I will become old, and I'm already white and male, so I'm 2/3 of the way there. And yet somehow it didn't quite strike me at the time that I am literally sowing the seeds for hatred against my demographic group. I'm no longer young, and I'm a white male, and all those I hate old white men, I wish they were all dead because the world would be better off for it, has come around to bite me in the ass. I'm like, hey, wait a minute. Actually, we're not so bad. We got some good things.
I mean, there might be a way to view that consistently if you're thinking like the problem is old white men today. And so in the future, when you're an old white man, you won't be the same as the ones today because you will have, you won't have inherited their problems or something, right? Or the things that made them problematic.
Sure, it's the actual things that are bad that we care about, right? The problem always was racism and sexism and those things, but we didn't say racism and sexism, we said old white men, and somehow, not shockingly, that is the thing that people hate consistently, even when they aren't racist and sexist. So that kind of sucked. Maybe I should have thought about my messaging better.
Oh, see, I see what you're saying. Not being online as much, I never really run into that. I do more of the, like, this idea is terrible and shouldn't be a thing versus like this group of people who believes this idea is terrible. So luckily I never ended that direct problem, but
you stayed well away from that petard.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a bit, but there are things where it's like, younger me didn't exercise as much as I wish he did.
Oh, yeah.
And this is what I like about the idea that, you will be the person you're discriminating against, even if it's like, he's not talking necessarily about the century out, person not being tortured or whatever. Every day we make the decision whether or not to discriminate against our future self. And this is a joke I make at work all the time. This is a bit of a mess, but I'll fix it later. This is Future Steven's problem. Fuck that guy. Sometimes it's self-aware in a way that doesn't have actual bad consequences.
Next week, we are going to be reading Circular Altruism and the intuitions, in quotes, behind utilitarianism, in quotes.
Ooh.